Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt. And before we get going, just want to really thank everybody out there for listening and participating and being part of the Robot Army. Really thank you guys. You guys make this show so much more fun and love your support and love your engagement. And today, happy to have my friend Varun Badhwar on. Varun, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Nick. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on this hot summer afternoon.
Yeah, man, it's super hot here in DC. I'm sure it is out west as well. But yeah, man, love if you don't mind, for everybody that hasn't have the doesn't has not had the opportunity to, chat with you or hear from you yet, man. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, kind of how you got here, man, and what you're doing now. I'd really love that.
Yeah, so again, Varun Badhwar, founder CEO of a company called Endor Labs in the software and application security space. We'll talk more about it. This particular company in 2021, but have spent the last 16 in companies looking at tectonic shifts happening in technology and its implications on cyber security, safety, etc. Dating back myself, prior to that, I spent about 4 years as a security practitioner at Salesforce.com. I was one of the first 1,500 employees to join Salesforce.com. I was one of the first four in its security team. Believe it or not, that team is about 2,000 people today. So it was really fascinating to learn about cloud and cloud security and shifting of architectures and implications. And I just got the bug to build companies and innovate and solve the hard problems that most people wanted to just take a status quo and live with. And I wanted to change status quo and break status quo and find new ways of solving hard problems.
Absolutely, man. No, and really the fascinating background, fascinating, and having worked at a lot, like when you think about technology over the last 30 years, right? You've really been building companies at some of the major inflection points around that, around SaaS, cloud. Now you're in the AI space. What fundamentally feels different about this AI wave compared to other inflection points and waves we've been at in the past?
Yeah, Nick, in 2015, when I started RedLock, my prior company around cloud security, the premise was all around move from data center to AWS, Azure, GCP. And we thought that was a big market. That it was massive, don't get me wrong, but it looks pale in comparison to what we're seeing with AI in terms of the speed, the implications, the impact. Andreessen Horowitz puts this specifically around AI coding, which, as you know, right now is the number one proven product market fit for AI use case, has like a $3 trillion economic impact. So, how often do you get to work on multi-trillion-dollar impacting problems in the industry? Um, Look, it's something that if you look at it from a coding perspective, we've had what 20 to 30 million developers in the world that could write software. Today, I would argue 200 to 300 million people can write software, right? Lovable, Replit. My mom and dad can write software. I'm sure your kids can write software, right? Like anybody can produce code and applications today. And so if you think about the implications of that, and then on the other hand, we're hearing about SaaS apocalypse. Oh, all these SaaS companies will die. Why will they die? Because we believe we can just create any software on our own. We don't even need to buy software. So
Absolutely.
all of this means we're going to produce 100x more code, maybe 1,000x more code in the next couple of years. And we have commoditized what it takes to be a coder.
Mhm.
Now, there's a whole existential question. Does this mean like coding jobs don't exist, et cetera, et cetera? I have lots of strong beliefs and opinions on that
What
if we
are
have
they?
to get in there. But
What are
look,
your beliefs for? And this is what we're here for, man.
uh, look, I think there's this strong debate in the industry, which is, are the experienced engineers more relevant or the young, earlier in career engineers more experienced? And I kind of see it go both ways, but I believe you need some adult supervision when there's a lot of code being produced because, like, from all the data that I see, beyond the metrics of, oh, look, we can create so many pull requests, so much more code, is what is the quality of the code? Amazon publicly described outages they were starting to have because they were letting their developers use Amazon Q, its coding agent, to write a lot more code, and people weren't paying attention to it. So I strongly believe that the most powerful combination is a senior, seasoned, experienced person on your code base, your stack, with lots of agents, right? So like I think about it as a manager of lots of coding agents
Mm-hmm.
is what you need. And that manager better understand the nuances of technology and architecture and scale and quality and security.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think we live in this world where it's incredibly impressive that code generation and software creation is no longer the problem or the bottleneck. The problem has shifted to the next point from there, which is how do we take all this code and make sure it's good, it's safe, it's scalable, and it's quality. And even last week, OpenAI released a new model, and you are seeing so many posts on social media where people that are trusting it are seeing their applications get blown up by these models. They're deleting their databases. They're completely, mucking with the application. So you need a whole verification harness now. You need a safety harness.
Mm-hmm.
We do a lot of work measuring the security effectiveness of all of this code being created. We created a benchmark with Carnegie Mellon and Columbia universities. And
Mm-hmm.
what that benchmark is showing us is even the most frontier of models today, Nick, are producing only like 20% of the code securely. So we are creating so much debt in the industry right now that we don't quite know yet how to solve that problem downstream of code generation, quality, scale, security. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. And that's what Endor Labs and my new company is working to solve. And I'm super excited about it.
Absolutely, man. As a mind. So can you tell for everybody out there that doesn't know Endor, can you tell everybody a little bit about Endor? I'd love it if you like, to start with why you founded this company and why you decided to specifically focus on this area. So I'd love to hear
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. I think it was part timing, part luck, part seeing around the curve. But in 2021, I made the bet that most of the software would not be written by our developers, and developers would really be assemblers of software, and software assembly would look a lot like car manufacturing lines, where you grab a bunch of stuff that is pre-created, prefab in open source and other places, and a software engineer's job is really compilation and putting together of all of these bits and pieces. The unfortunate reality that was scary for me at the time was bits and pieces come from just code submitted on GitHub. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what their motivations are. And, we don't know how well they're going to continue to support and secure the software that they're building. Yet the value of open source is so immense in terms of reusability that we have an implicit trust to just grab and go. And to me, as a cyber professional, it was like people, the attackers and the adversaries are all looking for the easiest ways to break into systems.
Hmm.
What other way can be easier than that when we have fortified our cloud, fortified our endpoints, fortified our network? That was a bet I made. And this was pre 2 years pre LLM starting to write code, but that's played out even more. At the time of founding Endor, I used to say 80% of the code would not be written by your developer. Today, 99% of your code is not written by developers, it's written by AI agents. But the scary part, Nick, is those AI agents have learned how to code based on the same code on open source. So they have learned the good practices, but they have learned all the 20 years of shitty security practices that they're now replicating at a way higher scale to individuals that are not trained developers or have the capacity intellectually to pay attention to that volume of slop. Not that all of it's slop, like there's a lot of greatness, but it's all mixed in. You got to be able to figure out what to do with it. And so Endor Labs, to answer your question, is a company that helps kind of eliminate this trade-off between speed of development and safety of the software, where we intersect the software development process as people and agents are producing code.
Hmm.
We are the security oversight in that loop. And
Hmm.
every time somebody's making a security error that could be consequential down the road when you ship this application, we're getting it fixed in the coding process. And the idea behind that is it's way cheaper and faster to fix this problem as you're in this assembly line of software than it is to ship this software and now issue a recall to millions of devices that have this software. And so now you kind of bring down the cost of security. You do it seamlessly in the agentic software development workflow. So it's not effort on a human to go fix all of this stuff. And that's in my view, and yes, I'm biased, in this world of mythos and post-mythos, where you have to assume every software vulnerability will be discovered by agents very quickly, is you cannot, the only thing you have to do now is eradicate security issues at the source. And that's what we help people do.
Dude, that's absolutely spectacular, man. Really, really interesting to hear kind of how you approach it, and but folks like us that are in and around the tech space understand the importance of fixing these issues at like at the coding level. But for somebody at speaking, imagine you're speaking to somebody that is not a technologist at all, right? They a consumer of technology, but as far as they're concerned, it's magic, right? Like their phone just works, their computer just works, they hit send, they have no idea what goes into any of this, man. Can you explain to somebody that, why is it that software security matters so much to their daily life?
It's fascinating. Actually, you remind me of a story, Nick, which is like I've been in cybersecurity for 20 years. Like people didn't understand what I did until Equifax got breached. And now today, social security numbers for all intents and purposes are public knowledge. Like, they're sold for like 20 cents, 30 cents on a dollar in like markets because every system, any retailer you bought anything from, you gave your credit card to any credit bureau that has your social security number, any loan application you did, it's all been breached. Why? We live in a world which operates on software. We touch our phone, that's software. We walk into a retailer, we do an e-checkout, that's software, right? We're paying an electricity bill, that's software. Our power grids are controlled by software, right? Our water supplies are controlled by software.
Mhm.
And so, in fact, in modern warfare, I believe today, before people execute on like bombs and missiles, the first thing nation states are doing is shutting down critical systems and critical services for different countries, right? So it's consequential to everything we do, what we eat, where we get our water supply from, our power, our banking system, everything runs on a backbone of software. And a lot of that software, even though we use it in 2026, was built 10, 20, some of it 30 years ago. And it had all of the things I was describing earlier, right? You picked up components from open source. 80% of the world's software is built on these open source components that we have no idea how secure or insecure it is.
Mhm.
And we have lived in this world with security through obscurity, meaning the cost for an adversary to try to find a way to break into your phone or break into your banking system was generally quite high. And so, it was nation state actors. North Korea was having, campaigns. Iran was running campaigns. Like you saw a lot of this, but it required a lot of compute. It required a lot of expertise to generally do this at scale. And
Mhm.
over the years, that started becoming easier and easier to break into systems, right? Things got simplified. Attackers were sharing tools with each other, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest dent has been in the last 12 months, where now you have these agents and LLMs, OpenAI and Anthropic and everything else. These tools are so freaking smart, right? They can do anything for you in seconds. I'm sure all of us look at it and it might write us an email, it might proofread a doc, it might write you a legal contract. But it's really simple and easy to do things. So historically, for somebody to exploit a bug in your phone that could allow somebody to hack your phone took like 2 years of time to build this exploit and figure out how to go do this. Today, with AI tools, you can do it in 10 hours on average. So, what this ultimately means is where traditionally the idea that finding security bugs and breaking into systems was generally complex, not everybody could do it, that bar has come down here. And we have millions and hundreds of millions and billions of lines of code that's out there that is vulnerable. It's known to have software bugs that can be exploited to break into systems and applications. And now the day of reckoning is here because people can break in and find every problem and break into systems really fast. And it's going to take us years to fix all of this years and years and years of security problems that we have traditionally shipped our software with in the world. And so that's kind of where we've come to today. And it's a greatly unsolvable problem for at least the 20, 30 years of legacy software that exists.
Absolutely. So is it like AI tools? And I know we talk about Mythos because Mythos, is for folks out there, Anthropic that don't know, Anthropic's Mythos model is a highly specialized model, correct? And correct me if I'm wrong, Varun, that
Yeah.
is really incredible at detecting vulnerabilities in software, right? And detecting vulnerabilities in code and finding ways in. Is that so? What I'm hearing you say is that has fundamentally shifted the environment in a way that exploits a lot of the, let's just say, it gives people it makes it a lot easier to go out and find vulnerabilities in software as opposed to where it was years ago. And while Mythos is, and now correct me if I'm wrong, is Mythos the best one in the world at this right now?
Look, Anthropic is the best at marketing
Well,
right
yeah,
now.
I'm like
Uh,
I
so
understand, man. I know they are like,
yeah.
but my question is that whether or not it is the best in the world, right?
Look, it's up
If there
there.
was one that was 75% as good,
Yeah.
that means
Yeah.
that there's 75% of the vulnerabilities that we've been sitting on for 20 to 30 years are now accessible by pretty much anybody. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the improvement curve is exponential on these models. They're getting significantly better. Obviously, the US government is calling Mythos like a national security threat, and that's why they're kind of putting a lot of restriction and regulation on who has access to Mythos and Mythos-like models. The problem, though, Nick, is you can regulate a couple of these models in the States. Like, by the way, GPT-5.5 from OpenAI is pretty darn good. But the crazy thing is the open source Chinese models that are freely available to everybody
Mm-hmm.
are like 80% as good right now on these kind of security tasks. So just because the US government is trying to regulate access to Mythos and hoping that would prevent an adversary and a bad actor from trying to break into systems at scale, that's not a good strategy. That's what I call a hope and pray strategy because other models are good enough and they're freely available.
Absolutely. And now you're not talking like, are you talking like DeepSeek or are you talking like other ones you pull off a Hugging Face that you're able to customize yourself or
All of them, all of them. There's lots of things. There's GLM. There's yeah. There's tons of models out there, and the crazy thing about this industry of cybersecurity is we need to defend against 100% of the attacks. The attacker needs to find one way in.
Yep.
So the odds are always stacked against the defenders. And yeah, like maybe Mythos can find 100 things, the next model can find 90, the one before can find 70. I mean, like even 70 vulnerabilities and 70 ways to break into an application is good enough.
Mhm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Of course they are, right? Because yeah, when you think about it, at the end of the day, if your goal is to get into a system, the difference between 70 ways in and 100 ways in is irrelevant,
Yeah.
right? And so would you agree that we're essentially seeing the democratization of cyber warfare at this point?
Yeah, I think generally that's kind of where we're headed. And for the last 20 years of how we have built software, and the trade-offs have always been industries have optimized for speed of software development, not security of software development. Because traditionally, doing security was a costly proposition. It took a lot of time, took a lot of engineering resources. And what we're trying to do with Endor is bring that down to a point where it's negligible, where like it doesn't make sense to make this trade-off because the cost isn't there. So you might as well ship secure software by default so there are less problems to worry about. Now it'll never be perfect. But again, if I can shut 68, 69 of the 70 doors and keep finding ways to get better and faster
Hmm.
ahead of the adversary on the others, that's what we're trying to build for.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this new paradigm where cyber warfare is democratized more or less, right? And I think about it from the through the lens of you remember the social media election interference that was going on in the 2016 election, right? That took a couple of office buildings full of people, and now it takes like four dudes in a basement. They're knowledgeable still, but as you said earlier, like it's the same thing with software development. You're managing instead of managing a code like a bunch of development agents, you're managing a bunch of agents that are going to break into things. Who should be most worried, and who do you think is most vulnerable in these places?
Yeah, yeah, so like to your point, like a teenager with agentic technology is as capable to break into systems today, I would argue, or close to as capable as nation state actors that have had a lot more firepower and compute and expertise to do it. So, like, who should be afraid? I think anybody that has thought about security as a reporting and compliance oriented function, like, yeah, we do things here, my engineers do stuff, my job is to just report on the problems and the list keeps growing and we don't do anything about it. I think that culture of security is gone, right? Or soon to be gone. I think companies where, yeah, where security teams efficacy was measured in reporting, not fixing. I think they're a little bit in trouble. I think organizations that measure their backlogs in hundreds of thousands and millions of problems that they have to fix someday, and their mean time to remediation was weeks and months and years, are in trouble. So I think the companies where the culture of security is an engineering problem isn't there are going to be in trouble in the future. So like my key takeaway right now is security needs to be integrated as a core competency of the agentic software development workflows everybody's building. Like your harness, right? Everybody talks about what are we trying to do? We write code, we do quality testing. Like security has to be key part of that, not an afterthought. And traditionally, security has been bolted on at the end, not integrated into development.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge, 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 huge problem. And so, as we have been talking about around the reduction of investment and the reduction of skills needed to perform these crimes, right? Obviously, there's these nation state actors, whether you think of like Russia, China, North Korea, like Iran, there's a bunch of them, right? That are going to have the resources to do anything. But now, like smaller groups are going to have these resources. Are we watching kind of like the cybercrime become more scalable as a as a business model for a lot of these, bad actors overseas or and even domestically?
Yeah, look, if you look at the last 5 years, we have seen that trend, right? Ransomware became a massive, massive, massive issue in the
Hmm.
country, which is I'm going to come in, I'm going to lock your systems, lock you out of your company and your data. We saw this happen to the healthcare world, where doctors weren't getting paid, payroll shut down. We've seen this happen to airports, other things. So yeah, like, just like like this is like digital kidnapping, right? That started happening a few years ago. That's essentially how I describe ransomware.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I think this will continue, right? More groups, more single individuals will have the capability to do this. So the odds are stacked against us. Now, I don't want to just talk doom and gloom, because you can now also, as a defender of technology, use the same agentic technology advancements to do security better, faster, cheaper than you could before. And
Yep.
that's a whole premise of like investments we are making and our customers are making with us, which is security was always a understaffed world. You
Yep.
could never hire enough security people to do the jobs. On average, Nick, for every 300 developers in any company, there is one security person.
That's not enough.
So it was never enough, right? And so now with the agentic technology, you can almost build an autonomous workflow that is automatically helping you code properly, configure properly. If new things are found, investigate, figure out how to fix it properly. So, the same technology that's available to the adversaries that we've been discussing is available to the defenders. The one big caveat is an adversary doesn't wait for a AI policy team in their company to approve it, or if you're in the
Yep.
government, like how long does it take to get approval to use new technology? Like, that is, I think, the bigger challenge we all have is in organizations, in regulated industries. We might take a year to adopt something. The attackers have adopted it in the first 24 hours.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I was going to ask, so how easy is it to, say I as an attacker have access to a Mythos type technology, right? How easy is it for me as a defender to have access to the same technology and use it to find and remediate, vulnerabilities that are in the code base?
Look, I think the technology mythos like capabilities, as I
Yeah,
like to call
Mythos
it. It's a
like
specific
that's just
model.
the that's the one that's the to your point, Anthropic has the best marketing team.
Yeah.
Like that's the one people are talking about for a reason.
Yeah. I think we all have the capabilities. The question is, what are the trade-off decisions to be made? Like for companies that have hundreds of thousands of security problems to be fixed, do we stop our business and spend the next 6, 12, 18 months just fixing all the security problems? If we do our competitors beat us because we have zero innovation in that time? So I
Hmm.
think those are the more existential business questions being asked around the world right now. I talk to a lot of companies that have Mythos access. It's like they've crawled to a halt for a certain point in time. People are burning out, working mornings, nights, weekends, because there's just so much onslaught of stuff. So I think it will take us a couple of years as an industry to kind of normalize this ratio of stuff being found to kind of bring this down. But my bigger worry, Nick, is as I told you with the statistics, 8 out of 10 new lines of code being produced with AI agents have security issues. So on one side, we have 20 years of security debt to burn down in the next few months, and maybe a year to two. But at the same time, we need to stop the bleeding. Like for all this new stuff being created with AI, more developers, more code, more security problems, we've got to inject ourselves there right now, today, and improve the security efficacy of that code generation.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, you're just on a hopeless curve of like you're never going to get out of this mess.
So, as we both know, these AI models are only as good as the data they've been trained upon. And so,
Yeah.
when you have a training data of 20 to 30, or call it 20 to 40 years of bug-ridden code infested with security issues, and you're using that as the basis to teach your new models how to write code. First, is there's no surprise that it's going to be filled with the same issues, right? But second, how could considering the training base out there, right? And considering the training data that's available, how can we even begin to get ahead of this because it's being trained on garbage code or issue-ridden code? I shouldn't call it garbage. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is kind of where specialized services and firms like us are focused on this problem, right? Like while the big models are getting trained on everything on the internet, our job is to create all of the security intelligence on that data set they're training on. So when either partnering with them and giving them access to that information and licensing that information so they can, as part of their post-training reinforcement learning, filter out the not so great parts of the things they've learned, or at least for our customers to use both technologies in conjunction. If you are using Claude Code, also use Endor in that same workflow, because Endor has a specialized security intelligence to tell these models where the security problems are infused and how to
Hmm.
avoid them and rewrite code properly, right? So it's always a trust and verify model
Of course.
that needs to be integrated into that workflow. It's like a maker or checker. One's writing, one is the security expert, just like humans, right? Like there's a developer, there's a security expert. If we could have a one-to-one ratio and make them work together, we'd be in a better place. With agents, you can do that. Every Claude code can have an Endor agent, giving it the security intelligence, fixing along the way, so we don't create these problems in the long haul.
Absolutely. And can you address or speak about some of the problems with the open source code? I know you touched on it a little bit, right? But
Yeah.
first, and can you quantify the scale of the problem? Like how much code out there is actually open source and how much is that used within these environments to go ahead and create these larger applications? And what does the supply chain of that look like?
Yeah. So on average, 80% of software, even like a company selling you software that you're paying a lot of money for, 80% of the code in that application is likely open source. So a majority of it is open source. It gets even more interesting because it's like a massive graph and a spider web of stuff. Every one open source library or component you use, on average, uses 77 other components. So you, as a developer, might be thinking you're bringing in this component X. So you're paying attention to the fact that you're pulling component X. When you pull component X into your application, that component X just brought 77 uninvited friends to your party,
Hmm.
right? So it's a very complex supply chain from that perspective. You really don't understand and know the identities of who these people are who created that code.
Correct.
You don't know what country they belong to. Or are you tripping over geopolitical restrictions? You don't know what motivates them. You don't know, how well trained they are. Is it a high schooler who just put something out there and it blew up? Or is it a trained professional who's doing this? So it's all unknown. You pull it all in, you start using it. The kinds of security problems you were talking about that come by are twofold. I would characterize the accidental problems and then the intentionally harmful problems.
Mm-hmm.
The accidental problems is I shipped code. I didn't know later down the road, we figured that there was a security bug. We find out about it. If I'm still paying attention to that open source project, because I have the keys as a maintainer, creator of that software to decide, am I going to do something about it? Am I going to fix it? It takes work. Nobody's paying me to do this work. I may choose at my own time to fix it. I may invite other maintainers to work with me on this project. So I get a lot of control around what it is. I get to decide when to fix, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these open source maintainers, they're hobbyists. They started these projects out of hobbies, and now they're getting all this pressure to fix all these security problems, and they're tapping out. They're saying,
Right.
like, look, like it's not my problem to solve. In fact, there's some really interesting statistics through the Mythos of Project Glasswing. They reported about 40,000 security bugs in open source software, and they have a less than 4% acknowledgement and response rate. Think about this for a moment. Anthropic is reaching out to all these open source maintainers. Only about 4% are even acknowledging that they got it, they're going to do something about it. Forget even fixes. So that's again, accidental
So
software has
out of
bugs.
40,000, we're talking 1,600,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or
So who's
be,
going to fix the rest, right? Who's going to fix the rest?
but
And this is
also
kind
what
of
dependencies are relying on those, right? And it's just
correct.
like, yeah, and like, yeah, like the thing I know you're talking about, like we're talking about is like, yeah, listen, some guy made or gal made this thing and put it online, and they're dependent on other things, and then those things are dependent on other things, and then they might be brought into another project that gets repackaged into open source. So now we're looking at like 7, 8, 9, 10 layers of dependencies, and there's no real visibility into the supply chain or security associated with it.
And that software might be the thing that's powering an F-35 fighter planes
Right. Or the missile
software
you were
technology.
talking about earlier, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
that's the okay, hey, there's some bugs. We got to fix them. Who's going to fix them at what pace? Blah, blah, blah. The more interesting, emerging, scarier thing is attackers, and a lot of this is nation state right now, are like, great. Millions of people just randomly pull stuff off the internet. Let us go start giving a small little utility open source project. They start using it. Now they're reliant on my piece of software. In a month, I'm going to ship an update that will have malware that will basically break into their systems. But because they already relied on my version 1 and they've set up auto updates, as soon as I publish version 2, 10 million applications will grab version 2, and now I have access, command, and control on that.
Mhm.
So, or Nick is an open source maintainer. Nick's project is used in 300 million applications.
Mhm.
I'm going to get into Nick's project. I'm going to like fool you to give me access to your project, or I'm going to put something in a bug in your code base without you knowing that is intentionally targeting the users of your code.
Mhm.
That is, kind of what we call malicious packages, malware and open source, et cetera, et cetera. But that is a very new problem that most companies have, I would say, near zero control on to prevent today.
Mhm.
We have seen Iranian-backed, North Korean-backed, Russia-backed nation-state campaigns that have at scale compromised companies like Cisco, companies, other very meaningful companies. In fact, they targeted a lot of security companies recently, a few months ago as well. And it's a greatly unsolved problem. The only way to solve this, Nick, is you need a new set of technology that you need to implement, which is what we call a package firewall. A thing that sits in the middle of your developers just randomly pulling stuff from GitHub that evaluates every request and decides to allow it or block it based on the intentionality, the quality, the security, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it sounds like we really do need to do that. It sounds like we really need to address a lot of how this technology is built. And I mean, how do you feel on like open source versus closed source systems, right? And for folks out there that don't know, like you think about open source systems like a Linux or what have you. But yeah, then there's also closed source closed systems like everything that Apple runs is all closed source. It's all one closed loop, and you don't really get root access to it. How do you feel about the trade-offs associated with that? And also, just because Apple's a closed system, that doesn't mean does that mean they're not using open source software at all?
Oh no, every closed source system is using, again, still about 80% of their code base is open source.
Mhm.
Look, this is a
So
very,
nobody builds anything from the ground up. So it's true that no new code has really been written since the 90s.
I mean, you build components to put together large pieces of code that are there. I don't know if I would agree that nothing's been built in the 90s. A lot of it's built and continues to be built. Like, just so you know, every single day, we evaluate 80,000 new open source projects and versions that are uploaded on GitHub.
Hmm.
80,000 a day. So there is a lot getting published. But to your point, when you start thinking about building software, the first thing you do is saying, what are all the things I can assemble that don't exist? And then I'm going to glue it together for what I need.
Hmm.
So everybody's putting the glue together, but starting with code that exists. A lot of that is recently written, continually updated. A lot of it is 20 years old, never updated. So it's just a mishmash of stuff. But to your question, you know, as I was telling you, all these hobbyists that put out these open source projects and now getting hounded about security problems and glasswing and anthropic reporting, a bunch of them are just backing up and taking their code and
I can't blame
leaving
you.
closed sourcing it because they say like, look, I can't handle this. Like the volume of this is too high. I never signed up to do this. Nobody pays me to do this. I'm just gonna bail. There are companies that are kind of moving from open source software to closed source software because of that just volume of noise around the industry. And then there's just a general debate of, is it open source more secure because more eyes have been on that software, more people have tried to break into it? Yeah, I mean, I think that's arguably true. In a closed source system, there's maybe security through obscurity because less people have tried to break into it. But I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion either. Or I think it's
Hmm.
I think if we get first principles, if we just pay way more attention to secure software development, not just software development, and we put the right guardrails up front in code generation, and we get the right tools to our engineers such that it's not a either or, speed or security, it's both,
Hmm.
then I think we can move a long way as an industry.
Absolutely. And what kind of yeah, I know that a lot of the reason, and I believe, and well, let me ask you, man, what are a lot of the reasons that people have historically shipped, bugged code? Is it mainly is it mainly cost based? Is it lack of knowledge, or is it like adapting technologies have created vulnerabilities where there weren't some in the past? Like, why is this, code that has all these bugs being shipped?
Um, I think it was part ignorance, which is like, yeah, we weren't putting the right checks in place up front to verify the software being built. Part of it was if I'm a company with 5,000 developers, I'm trying to train everybody manually through annual security training programs how to do the right thing. It doesn't scale. The biggest part, though, is the tooling that was built traditionally to scan software, it's called application security testing, AST in short, was just a bunch of crap, honestly. It was very noisy. It created so much crying of wolf. Like the fidelity of information couldn't be trusted. And so when you do that, you just get these. Imagine you're an engineer trying to get your application out or an engineering manager.
Hmm.
And 4 days before your release, security team sends you an 800-page report
Oh,
of security problems.
I'm not gonna read that. Yeah.
So, so that's the world that we've lived in. Now, few things need to happen. One, you need to do this in the development process, not after, right? What is commonly known as shift left.
And that's
The
what you guys
second,
are doing.
yes, so that's one. Second thing is You need to stand behind the quality of results, meaning if I'm telling you something is wrong as an engineer, don't just give me some hypothetical and make it my job to go figure out and explore, is it real, is it not? Like the best tools historically were giving like 50% accuracy. Best tools. Most of them were like 20% accuracy. So how am
Mm-hmm.
I going to believe stuff? So how do I get the accuracy numbers to 90, 95%? And how do I make sure when I'm giving you something, Nick, the developer, gets it in their development workflow,
Mm-hmm.
gets it with evidence of the problem, prove to me this is a real problem, and tell me how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that in an automated workflow in where I work, don't go send me a PDF report of this problem. And you give me automated buttons that I could just say, okay, you've seen the problem, you're proving to me this is right, and you've told me the fix, and you've created the fix for me to review. All I have to do is approve or reject. That is the workflow that a modern developer needs to get their work done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's how you get past this problem.
No, 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, if you're building out, so if you're building out a product, like, obviously it's a lot of what you said. If you're sitting in these say, and I'll just pick a big one like a Microsoft or an AWS or an Amazon or a Cisco, one of these behemoths with god awful, like ungodly amounts of code. How do you even begin to address this problem from a legacy standpoint? And then also looking forward, because I know we've all seen the reports around how when people give their developers and like these are the tech companies, right? These are the tech companies. Like this is not like a Capital One, that's not a technology first company, that is a technology empowered company, right? Or a Goldman Sachs or one of these other organizations that has all these other vendors in there. Like, how do you even begin to start addressing some of these problems while also not, using, hundreds of millions of dollars in like AI tokens on a month?
Yeah, great question. So look, the companies you're mentioning are typically sitting on backlog of software vulnerabilities in the 5, 10, 15, 20 million findings range.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first question becomes, okay, why are you sitting on so much pile of mess? We know that's not real, but the problem is that's what all these scanning tools are reported, and you have no way to prove unless you put humans. Every investigation, not even a fix, just to explore, is it real, is it not, on average takes 8 hours of a human developer's time to triage and understand, is it real, is it not, and then several weeks to fix. How do you take that entire workflow and agentify it and automate it? So, as an example, when those types of customers come to Endor Labs and plug in our technology into their code base, on average, we will cut that pile of existing findings down by 95%, 92 to 95%, because we will weed out what is theoretical, what is false positive, to what is provably evidence backed, exploitable in the environment. So now I gave you hope that now we're only looking at 5 to 7, 8% of the things in your pile that you have assumed you have. Then it's about how do I take that list and go figure out what can you fix easily. So
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of say, okay, the things I can fix easily, automate, agentify. And the beautiful thing is this is using a combination of static analysis, deterministic, quote unquote, non-AI techniques
Mm-hmm.
to bring this down, and then using AI to execute the tasks. And so, versus the alternative, if you just took 20 million security findings and gave it to AI and said, just go figure out what you can do, one, it may do it, but you'll be bankrupt by the time it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, it doesn't have all of the fidelity of knowledge around the security issues to get it all right, which is why I go back to, if it could, it would have just written code more securely. We've gone back to the basics of why the training data is limiting for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to kind of fuse a hybrid platform that takes rule-based static techniques and AI to do this allows you to do this on average at 1/12 the cost of trying to do it just with AI, with
Mm-hmm.
2.6x more efficacy of the quality and reliability of the results. So that's how we do it. That's how we help these massive companies burn down their backlogs very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, 100%, man. No, that makes a lot of sense. And as we start looking at kind of wrapping up this conversation for first, love your product, man. Love what you're doing. Super, super important. Really appreciate you coming on. Anything else you'd like to add to this for folks out there that maybe are struggling with this or thinking about these problems and thinking about these issues and
Yeah.
how, anything along those lines or no?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll summarize it this way. I think we've talked about a lot of things. One, it may seem otherwise, but I am equally excited about what AI's promises and what it can do to how we build software in the future. So, no doubts on uh, the fact that I'm embracing this. This is the way forward. What I am proposing here is two things. One, I'm suggesting that it's going to be a very painful next couple of years for us to normalize the 20, 30 years of mess we have created as an industry to clean up some of that. I'm also proposing that the same AI technology allows us to move forward with building more secure software by default if we make the right choices up front. Um, that's essentially what I would say. So it's going to be a bumpy ride for a little bit. When we get out of this, I think we're going to be in a way better place if we're smart this time around not to consider security an afterthought, because that's the unfortunate reality. We have always considered cybersecurity an afterthought, and I don't believe we can afford to do that anymore.
I would 1,000% agree, Varun. I think yeah, I'm right there with you. I believe that those that consider security an afterthought are going to be the first ones that are hacked, and that gets real expensive real quick.
Right.
So, but yeah, man, no, really, really, really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation, Varun.
Awesome. Great to have you. Great to chat with you, and thanks for having me.
So, man,
Have a good
everybody
one.
out there, thanks so much for listening. I hope you're having a wonderful day.